Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen. We're with comic Ali Gordon. Ali Gordon, how the hell are you?
Hi, I am okay. I am
good.
sitting in my apartment as I have for the last 4 months or so, as I assume you are as well.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, we work now in a little phone booth, but I'm hoping that you've made your apartment just a wonderful place to exist for 4 months.
A little. It's sort of also become a voiceover booth, as I found like you have as well. So it's like kind of my home, kind of my office.
Good. So you just remain productive, and I follow your online comedy here at Twitter. You're a Miss Alice Nutting, which just,
Correct.
I mean, it just makes so much sense. I know exactly who Alice Nutting is.
No, I know we talked about this, not to shatter the fourth wall, but as we were preparing for this call, Brian was like, "What is that a reference to?" And I was like, "Oh my God, it's a reference to a musical called The Mystery of Andrew, but it's also like a sub reference within the reference." And if I could go back in time and like slap myself when I made all of my social handles Miss Alice Nutting as like an enthusiastic musical theater student in school, I would go back in
Yeah,
time and tell her not to do that.
it really is such a kind of a coincidental, interesting story that I could see somebody being so into it at the time that you just made that your social. But another funny thing is you said Ali Gordon is taken by you, aligordon.com, although I prefer to go to What Does Ali Gordon Do, which is a suite. It's got all your comedy on there. But it's I looked you up on Instagram thinking it'd be Ali Gordon, and there's this thirst trap male model guy, and it
Yes.
sounds like he reached out to you because he wanted his domain, and you were like, "Fuck no, bro."
I know. Well, so I've painted him as a villain in my retelling of these stories. He's not. He very politely was like, if you're not using it, like I'm building a brand. And I was like, okay, well, I'm building a brand. So I
Yes.
said no. I said no a couple times. But he offered me money for it. So
Okay.
he's not like a total jerk.
And you're like, well,
Sorry,
let's
Allie
see.
Gordon.
Yeah, let's see how robust your brand is. How much are you offering me, Ali Gordon?
Truly, I just kind of was like, well, I am also building a brand.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a weird little gremlin woman doing comedy. Like, I have to have my own thing.
And you're like, my comedy will age better than your looks.
Who knows? Because he does seem to have good genes, so I might
Good.
be wrong
Yeah.
on that one.
Yeah, he could do lifelong fitness for everybody. It's just so I'm so glad that there's only one Ali Gordon. There's only one fitness influencer in town, right? Like there's not a million
Right.
of them out there.
No, and
Okay.
it would be really weird if I decided to just like take a real turn on my life and also become like a fitness influencer. British. He's got
Yes.
a very lovely accent. He seems like a nice man. Maybe we'll meet someday.
Uh, yeah, I love it. You just totally go into fitness influencing and you really fuck up his brand that way. It's like, dude, I didn't care about fitness influencing, but then you reached out to me about my
Exactly.
domain, and I was like, dude, I might do that too. Let's
Now I'm
totally
gonna get
confuse.
jacked. Absolutely.
Let's confuse the fuck out of people. And then one thing is you have the second best D&D, and I guess it's a big old Dungeons and Dragons, and I think it's comedy improv
Yes,
Dungeons and
very
Dragons
much
too.
so.
Like you guys, somebody sets the kind of the role or whatever, and then comedy improv people are playing D&D for everybody to learn. Are you on Twitch or what?
We are strictly a podcast.
Okay.
We have done a couple streaming things, especially now that we've been in quarantine. Like we did this like phenomenal live show last year in New York City, and that was so fun. And we wanted to do more of those. And obviously, with the current situation, I have no idea when we'll have like 120 people in a room again. Um, so we started doing some like live stuff and some Twitch streaming and things like that. But truly, if you want to hear this podcast, it is a podcast. It's audio only.
Okay.
When you play D&D, you can do little one shots. You can do games that last 3 weeks. You can do a game that lasts 3 hours, or you can do games that last 3 years, which is what we are playing currently. So yeah, we've been doing it for a really long time. We've only been releasing episodes for about 2 years, but we like started with a huge backlog because we wanted to make sure we were like excited about the story we were telling and it had like meat on the bone. So we had like a backlog of almost 9 months or something like that of material before we started releasing episodes. Um, but yeah, that's the part that's so exciting is that like we've been playing it for such a long time, and by the nature of D&D, you roll this character, you inhabit this character, and unless the character dies or you get sick of them and you ask for them sort of to be like written out of the game, you keep playing the character. And so I've been doing improv for a very long time, and I have never ever ever played a character for 3 years.
Yeah.
it's cool. It's kind of like the sitcom of podcasting.
But yeah, I guess my question is a little twofold. Like for somebody who like, a normal, I almost said a normal person, meaning somebody who has studiously avoided D&D. If I'm firing up second best D&D podcast, which of course I will, like what am I going to hear, and will it matter that I did not hear the first 2 years of the 3-year game?
So what you are going to hear is a D&D campaign played by very good friends who are all in some way or another professional comedians. So
Yeah.
when we're trying to like sell this podcast or we're trying to like talk it up, what we say is that we hope to be the funniest D&D podcast you'll ever hear. Maybe just like a really very funny podcast on its own merits, whether or not you are interested in D&D at all.
Okay.
D&D is just the mechanic for which the story is told. It is
Uh,
an improvised story where when we come to decisions, we have the mechanics of D&D to help us make those decisions, as opposed to just being like, well, we decide we're going to do that. That is just what D&D is at all.
so meaning like instead of fielding like, words from the audience, you have the rules of D&D to kind of guide you.
Yeah. And so like there's one person who is like, they call it either like the dungeon master or the game master. They're the only person who kind of knows where the story is going because they're the ones who are responsible for the details of the campaign.
Yeah.
And that's it. So they might come to you and say like, hey, you're sitting in this bar and a person runs up to you and is like, oh, I've heard about you, brave heroes. My town is being ravaged by demons.
Okay.
And that's kind of it. Like you either get to be like, okay, we'll go help you. I really want, like I'm a person who's like a big ego. So I'm going to go help them just because I want the recognition. Somebody else might be like, I'm not going to help you unless you give me 100 gold. Someone else might be like, I want to help you, but I'm a pacifist and I don't want to kill the demons. I want to see if I can like drive them out of town. You know what I mean? Like,
well, because it's a yes and, you wouldn't be like, no, I'm just going to sit here and drink, leave.
yes. And
because
like
that would mean that the rest of your episode is set in a bar, which would not be interesting at all. You have to be like, yeah, I'll go there, but because I'm friends with demons, I'm actually going to join their side or something.
Exactly. And so like, I have heard from people who've been playing D&D for a long time that like, because people who don't have improv backgrounds do say no sometimes. They'll be like, well, my character's kind of a jerk, so my character says no. And it's like, well, your character's going to have to say yes and be a jerk, so find a way to justify it. But that's obviously, luckily, not been a major issue in terms of our playing, just because like we're very good at saying yes to each other, and we're very good at like giving people a moment to shine and understanding that like if their character does something, it's not necessarily because they as a human are trying to like thwart our plan or disagree with us. Like we're just have been more improvising with each other for a very long time. So it's easy to like delineate between those two things.
And nobody knows the rules going in except the dungeon master. And does the dungeon master is like that person's so knowledgeable about improv that they set a scenario that's going to be, plentiful for storylines and conflict and things.
Exactly. And like, we all do need to know the rules to some degree, simply because there are like things like skill checks. Like, I want to jump over this bridge. And it's like, well, the bridge is 8 feet wide. Well, I think my character do, right? And so it's like you roll dice and things like that to see if you can do it. Ditto to like combat situations. Like you are like, I have this sword and there's like stats for the sword. It's really like a video game on paper, which is weird for me to say because I don't enjoy video games, but I very much enjoy D&D. But I also enjoy D&D because it's like, there is the fantasy aspect. And I don't even mean that in terms of like strictly just like, I've got magic. Literally the character that I've been playing on this podcast for a bazillion years, his name is Bug. He's 6'4". He's a paladin. He was an ex-soldier. He's like the tank of the party. And so like, for me, that is kind of the fantasy too, is that like, I'm really strong and I'm really physically imposing. And like, the way the world treats me and the way that I behave in the world is like so different than the experience that I will ever feel, even if I do get jacked and come for Ali Gordon's gig. Like, I just, you know what I mean? I will never be like, I walk into a room and the atmosphere of the room changes because I'm like so big and strong. Do you know what I mean?
Did you pick it because that's you kind of wanted to experience life a different way? Or, I mean, and how are, does everybody pick their own? Or like on the first episode, how the hell did those things get revealed? Like, so even if you knew going in, you just kind of slowly revealed through the scenario that I'm of course I can jump that high because I'm 6'4". I don't have to jump high at all.
Exactly. Okay. So like, I think I'm going to sell you on D&D, Brian.
Yeah, I
So
love it already. Because some of
before,
these role playing games, I don't want to stop a scenario and sit there and read. But if
yes,
like hilarious people were instantly being like, all right, let's go fight some demons, and like you guys were all hilarious, I'd love listening to
that's why I think you might enjoy it, but also I think you might really like playing it, is because
it.
people tend to have like a session zero, which is like before the story starts, we all sit down and roll characters and talk about like the composition of the party. Being like, just like if you were playing like an RPG game, you might want to have like the healer, and you also might want to have somebody who's a really strong magic user, and so on and so forth. And then you also just want to like be on the same page in terms of tone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you by far and away the most popular D&D franchise is it's something called Critical Role,
Okay.
and it's very serious. So no offense to them if they're listening to this, which they obviously aren't, but
Is
I
that
don't.
is it a podcast though?
It is a
Critical
live
Role.
stream. You can watch it.
Okay.
I think they make it as a podcast too. I got to be honest, I don't really know because I like cannot engage with it. Like it feels so stupid to me, which is crazy because I know I do the same thing, but they're like, you thrust your sword into that, and I'm like, la 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 la, and I hate it. I don't know
So are they
why.
dramatic voiceover artists who are the people
Yes,
who are on that podcast? Okay.
exactly. And
Okay.
they have like no shade. They have like amazing chemistry, and they're great at storytelling, and like they hit all the beats. And clearly it is a really engaging story because people absolutely flip for it. So it's like, again, like I understand this is personal taste and not act like legitimate criticism, but it just like is not for me.
Yeah.
But like I'm trying to, or we're trying to tell a story on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is like very goofy, very lighthearted. Our primary instinct is to make people laugh and to like engage with the unconventional way to solve problems or to discuss a situation or to treat the NPCs we come across. And it's like, there have been very serious story moments. And there have been moments where I've been like genuinely afraid for our characters' lives, or like, where are we going to go, and political intrigue. But it's because we have given into the comedy so much, when those moments of seriousness pop up, the contrast is so great
Yeah.
that we're like afforded those moments as opposed to like seeking out those moments. I've never ever been like, I can't wait till we get to the dramatic moment because I've got like this real good speech planned. You know what
I got the tears. I got the tears at the
I mean?
ready.
Exactly.
But
Um,
like, were you guys D&D fans going in? Because I would think like, okay, if you guys are an improv team that's kicking ass and just anticipated the quarantine was coming and knew you needed kind of online product so that your Ali Gordon brand could spread to the British island and take away that fitness
right.
influencer. Like, you guys could have started anything that could have set, just anything. You could add
Right.
callers, suggesting words, etc. Like, why did you guys decide on a D&D podcast? Were you guys all interested? Or do you
No,
just
not at
know
all.
that everybody out there, there's so many D&D fans that you can make them all laugh?
It I would say, so our dungeon master, whose name is Stephen Buckley, has been playing D&D since he was a kid, and has gone
Uh,
through like 3 or 4 different kinds of D&D. Like they update rules and things like that. So he was our like
uh,
resident expert.
yes.
I was familiar with D&D. I'd never really played it, but I had listened to a podcast that I really loved, which is called The Adventure Zone, which was like funny, and I had no idea D&D could be funny at all. And I was like, oh my god, like this is like right, this is just improv. It's improv with rules, and I have to
Yes.
be honest, I love rules. So I was like, I love this.
And you love
um
the fantasy too of being the 6'4" bug.
I 100%, and that's
Yeah.
like part of why when we sat down for that session zero, and there was like, you can be anything. I was like, anything? And you're like kind of flipping through this player handbook, and ideas are kind of coming to you because you're reading about like the backgrounds, and like it's like, do you want to be a ranger? Do you want to have like archery weapons? And you're like, oh, that's cool, that kind of inspires me. And the more I was like reading about the kinds of characters you could be, and I knew I didn't want to play myself or
Yeah.
anything close to myself. Like that is why I got into improv in the first place. Truly, like I went
As
to
an escape or something.
yes, I went to
Like,
musical theater school. I love musical theater. Sometimes when I say like I've kind of given it up, people think that it's because I had like a dramatic falling out with it. I still adore it and think it is like an important an important like invention of the like modern world. But you really only kind of play things that are conceivably you, which is fine, but I like loved that the minute I started taking improv class, if I walked into a scene and I was like, I'm a dog, everyone was like, yes, you are. Or even vice versa, if I walked into a scene and it was like I'm the school jock and I'm like the head of the football team, people are like, yes, you are. And there's no question. There's no question on the team's part. There's no question on the audience's part. Like if I say it, it is true. And that's like so wonderful and intoxicating, frankly. And so like I knew that I liked that and I wanted that to be part of my D&D experience as well. And so it's like, yes, I could have played like a female halfling rogue. Halflings are basically like hobbits. Like that's what I would be if I like got into if like I woke up in the world of D&D. Like I'd be like a little lady. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. I'd like to like if I'm gonna live in this character, I'd like to see what it's like to like completely and totally live as something else.
And because it's voiceover, like you won't get typecast like that. But I suppose like even on stage, I mean, so you, in what scenario would you come and say I'm a dog? Like it's not usually presented like that, right? You don't say I'm
No,
this. You just start acting like a dog,
we
right?
just kind of act
And
like it.
you just hear all the
like,
word choices, and you're like, I really think I could do some funny stuff with it, as being a dog. And so you come on and you come on all fours and you start barking, and people know you're a dog.
yeah. Or even like, because improv can be anything. I remember we had like a Herald once where I played like a rescue dog that lives like in like a fire tower, like an Appalachian Mountains rescue dog. I do not remember the rest of the premise, but like I talked, but whatever. Do you know what I mean? It was still like dog behavior, dog brain. So it's like, if the rules of improv are like you have to try and focus the world's lens through the eyes of this one character, it's like, what's a dog's victory? What's their greatest fears? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the audience
And
is
so
like,
you're
yeah,
saying there was this guide in the D&D thing that kind of guided you through the series of choices you should be making. Like
yes.
you're like, okay, what's the profession? What's my backstory? Like they kind of, and so that helped you be like, okay, not only do I have to decide how tall I am and what my talent is, but you have to kind of decide what your weaknesses are too.
Exactly. And also like the backgrounds come with certain like bonuses. Like so again, it's all stuff that I chose because this character was sort of forming in my mind, but one of the backgrounds is soldier. So it could be somebody who is currently one or was one. And so the idea that came to me was this person who had like defected and had run away because he was not happy with the life he was living. But I still get all these bonuses from having the soldier background. For example, you're really good at intimidation, which I thought again was like very fun because it's like literally built into the character of being like, I'm good at it because I did this for a very long time. And the character that I'm playing, if you listen, is like a total sweetheart and like really wants to be as nonviolent as possible. And so the interesting thing is he is naturally imposing and therefore intimidating. And so like if I ever roll to intimidate someone, I think I have like +7 to any roll that I do. Because I roll my
But
dice
then everybody else
so
in your improv troupe has to know that, but also the person at home has to know that. Like, so how are we supposed to know? Like, you're such a sweet person, and we get to know you as the 6'4", just gentle giant or whatever. Like, how am I, the listener, supposed to know that you have the +7 intimidation because you come up to an intimidation scenario and I hear
yes,
the dice get rolled and it says
exactly.
+7?
Yep,
Okay.
basically. So
And so
sort of
like
it's like
these
because
things
we're
where,
acting it out too. It's like it's not just like I do this. Okay, you do
yeah.
it. I mean you can do it that way, but that's not very fun to listen to. But like if we act it out and a guard is like, well, you're not going past here. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try. Usually, what I do in these situations is I'll be like, I'm going to try and talk nice to him. But what ends up happening is because of my size and my stature and my background, I come across as very intimidating. So
Okay.
even if the words that I say are like, it would just make us really happy if you'd let us get through, if I roll the dice and I roll a 10 and I have a +7, I suddenly rolled a 17 out of a possible 20.
Yeah.
So I succeed and I really intimidate this guy. And I don't even have to like go against my character's instincts and be like, well, I'll be mean to him. I'm not really
Yeah.
mean. But even if I just say like, oh, we'd really like that, and I wouldn't want to make any trouble for you. If I say I
There's a
wouldn't want to make any trouble for you,
There's a subtext.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And so I mean, like in our mind's eye, though, Ellie Gordon is 6'4", and she's this giant. And so by then I will have seen in my mind's eye you talking to a guard and towering over him.
Exactly. And it's
Uh,
just like part of good storytelling, and it's part of the yes and that like the other people who I improvise with know who my character is too, in the same way that like if you watched a sitcom for 3 years,
Yeah.
like I don't write sitcoms. Not that I don't think I couldn't, but like that's not necessarily like a part of my life. But I remember reading some advice once about like how to know that you are like writing characters that have lasting potential. And it really has to do with like the lens which they see the world. And it's like, you can get laughs before you even see a character's reaction because you know the character so well, you know how they're going to be reacting, right? So it's like, I think the example they gave was something from Friends. I don't know, something like that, where it's like, if we cut to something and we see the like washing machine, like it's going crazy, it's like bubbling over. We're laughing before we even cut back to the character because we know that we know how she's going to react already. And so when she reacts like that, it's just like a validation of our knowing of the character. And like,
like when
I do feel like,
yeah, go ahead.
no, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I love. I was thinking of so many Friends scenarios, like when the dollhouse caught on fire, and Ross was putting it out with a glass of water. That was just so funny to see his reaction to the fact that a glass of water couldn't put out a burning dollhouse.
Right.
But I love that so much, and it's like, there's a couple. I had Dash Kwiatkowski on, and they have they call their podcast like the fourth best D&D podcast, and he said he had on there. Sorry, they said they had on there the villain on RoboCop, and so I don't know that they're necessarily a comedic podcast. And so, how does Ali Gordon ensure that the second best D&D podcast becomes the first best? And were you just being funny and naming it the second best, or are there other comedy D&D podcasts out there that are doing the same thing? Obviously less good, less well than you are.
Totally. So the like premise log line of this podcast, which we knew from the beginning, was that our characters are like the second string tier of heroes that like they get counted on, which is kind of where the name came from.
I love
so it's
that.
like there is this team in the fantasy world of Malarian, which is where we live. There is this team called the Finest, which is like in the world of this world, like basically like calling the Avengers. It's like the best of the best adventurers, the highest level, blah, blah, blah. And our team is like the cleanup crew. We're like the second string. We're like, if they leave a big mess in a town, we have to go figure it out. Or if there's a big enough problem and the Avengers are dealing with it over there, we'll go deal with the smaller problem.
That's so funny. Yeah, the world's going to explode, so the Finest is going to help that, and you guys are just warding away a couple demons who like to eat chocolate or something. Okay,
exactly.
Well, that's fucking hilarious. And then like, is any of this stuff making its way into your non-podcast comedy? Like if you on Miss Alice Nutting here on Instagram? Are you doing sketch videos that at all kind of touch on, I don't know, fantastic characters, or are you trying to play a role that's not Ali Gordon, like a big 6'4" person, like, or your comedy writing? Like, what's a non-Dungeons and Dragons comedy product from Ali Gordon look like?
Well, so before the end times and the world sort of crumbled around us, besides improv, I was also very involved with sketch comedy, primarily at UCB, but other places as well. And again, part of the reason I like sketch comedy so much is I like a collaborative environment. I do and can write alone, but I have learned I strongly prefer working in a collaborative environment. Yeah. And so sketch comedy is like the perfect marriage of that. I don't love writing sketch by myself. I don't think I'm great at it. I think I'm really good at like bringing in premise and bringing in character. And so the fact that I was on a team that got renewed for a second year. So for like a while, I worked with the same group of writers. And if I had an idea for a character, I could almost guess which writer would want to write up the pitch. And so I'd start to try and like, make it like more specific to them. Or I'd even like in the room be like, I'd love to collaborate on Laura with this one. Yeah. Which is great. I just love that experience. Like that is kind of how it works at SNL, I kind of think, but I also kind of think it only works that way if you're like one of the high profile cast members. So it's like, you were the
Kate McKinnon of UCB.
Exactly. But I got that experience of being like, I've already been on SNL for 7 years, and like I'm not obviously at that like level of clout, but it's like that is such a great relationship. And again, I still very often pitched characters that were totally crazy and like completely away from my personality. Because I think that that's like part of the fun is that, again, if you say it's true, it's true. And that's part of what is so fun about stage sketch comedy versus screen. Yeah. Because like filmed sketch comedy, what you see is true. And so the makeup has to be on point, the costuming, the casting, you know what I mean? Like if you see it, it is true. And so if it looks fake or it doesn't look like it hits the right genre, the eye, because we're trained to like watch movies, immediately goes, that's not real.
and
And it
then
takes you out of
they can typecast you at that time. So that's why it's better to do a stage sketch or improv. And having spoken with Ali Gordon, and I'll leave you with this, I can honestly say that I predicted that the second best podcast, which is second best D&D, would have outlasted UCB. I could have
we
predicted it. It came true.
that. We literally so I'm very thankful to have this because we didn't make it because of the pandemic. We've been making it for years, but it is the only comedy venture that I have right now that is still continuing and can still continue without question. And so it's like, what a immense blessing. And I don't even mean that from like a brand way of like, oh, thank God I'm not, completely nobody. I'm still building my brand. I really mean just like, thank God I have an outlet for like this love and this enthusiasm. And like, I don't know when the next time is I will get on stage and perform improv again, which is very scary. I've never said that in my life before. Like, I have no idea when I will perform live again. And I do know when I will like record again, second best. And it's like, it's really, we are very fortunate.
Well, I'm so glad that you guys have an outlet, because that means that I can finally pick up D&D. And Ali Gordon was the one to take me through it, like my own dungeon master Sherpa. Ali Gordon, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much.